Amelia's heart raced as she stood at the altar, her gaze fixed on James, who held her hands with an unreadable expression. The officiant's voice blended into the background as she took in the surreal beauty of the moment. This was supposed to be her dream come true, the culmination of a love that had started years ago, entwined with her childhood memories. But just as the vows were about to be exchanged, a firm voice echoed through the room, shattering the silence. "Stop," he announced, his tone commanding attention. "This wedding cannot go on." Ethan turned toward Amelia. "I didn't want to do this here, but you left me no choice." It was Ethan, his face tense with a storm of emotions. Gasps rippled through the crowd, and Amelia's hands trembled as she looked at him, confusion and dread flickering in her eyes. She knew what he was about to do. She wanted to stop him, but seeing everyone's reaction, she couldn't move, as somebody was not allowing her to move. Amelia could not stop Ethan now and just wait for the truth to unfold. 15 years ago, the Miller family had a reputation for wealth and influence that extended across the city and beyond. Evelyn was a force in the business world, sharp, ambitious, and fiercely dedicated. Known for her strategic thinking and elegance, she built the family's financial empire into a highly successful venture that other companies looked up to. Her best friend, Amelia's mother, Lillian, had been by her side through every success and failure. They'd been inseparable since their school days, and Evelyn often credited Lillian with inspiring her focus and strength. They shared dreams and ideas, and both were successful in their fields, each raising their children with the values of loyalty and resilience. However, everything changed one tragic day when Lillian and her husband were on a business trip. A horrific plane crash took their lives, leaving young Amelia orphaned and Evelyn heartbroken. The news shattered Evelyn, who struggled to come to terms with the loss of her closest friend. That tragedy shifted something fundamental in her, turning her passion for business into a quiet grief that lingered in every corner of her mind. She felt that her life of high-stakes deals and boardroom battles paled in comparison to what she'd lost. Evelyn's focus shifted. She found herself unable to return to her former life with the same ambition and drive. After ensuring that Amelia was adopted into the Miller family, she withdrew from the business world, handing control of the empire to her husband, Henry, a capable businessman, but one who had always taken a quieter role beside her. The decision was shocking to those who knew her, but Evelyn was unyielding. She needed a new start and was determined to give Amelia a family who could help her recover from her loss. They decided to leave the city and move to a spacious, rustic mansion on the city's outskirts, where life moved at a slower pace. Unlike the city's bustling energy, the mansion was surrounded by lush forests and sprawling green fields. The mansion was beautiful but serene, with ivy climbing its stone walls and large arched windows that overlooked the breathtaking landscape. The interiors were elegantly designed yet understated, echoing Evelyn's intention for a simpler, quieter life for her family. Over time, Amelia grew up alongside James, her world shaped by the gentle rhythms of the countryside and the sense of love and protection that Evelyn and Ethan provided. Evelyn encouraged her to follow her interests, supporting her through school and instilling in her the confidence that her parents would have wanted for her. Though she had grown up in a family with wealth and status, Amelia remained down to earth, her heart shaped by the values of kindness and empathy that Evelyn imparted to her. Evelyn always saw Amelia as the daughter she never had, a gift that fate had left in her life after Lillian's passing. On the outskirts of a bustling city was a beautiful mansion where Amelia's and James' love was blooming. They were inseparable childhood friends, the kind that everyone knew would end up together. But was it really an unbreakable and true love, as Amelia thought? To Amelia, her love for James felt like a fairy tale, as though fate had woven their lives together for a reason. She had loved him ever since childhood, their shared memories holding a tenderness that gave her strength and hope. After her parents' sudden death in a tragic plane crash, Amelia was shattered. Though Evelyn welcomed her into the family with open arms, showering her with affection, it was James who became her anchor. He made her feel alive when she feared she'd be consumed by grief, often through small gestures that, though unintentional, meant the world to her. In the beginning, when Amelia was still reeling from the loss of her parents, she would often retreat to the quietest corner of the garden. Hiding away from the world, she felt a heavy silence wrap around her, a constant reminder that her parents would never come back. On one such evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow, she heard footsteps behind her. She didn't turn. She assumed it was Evelyn or one of the house staff checking on her. But instead, she felt a familiar warmth as James sat beside her. He didn't say anything. He simply handed her a mug of hot chocolate. She took the cup, her hands trembling as she felt the warmth seep into her palms. This small, simple gesture brought her a wave of comfort and nostalgia, a reminder of home. Though James didn't know it, that moment stayed with her, offering a glimpse of the love she believed was perfect. There were many other times that James' small gesture slowly made Amelia open her heart. In one of the family gatherings, Amelia had been feeling out of place. Even though she was now considered part of the family, the emptiness in her heart left her feeling disconnected. As relatives laughed and shared stories, Amelia found herself standing alone by the fireplace, quietly observing everyone around her. Suddenly, James walked up to her, noticing the faraway look in her eyes. Without a word, he wrapped his coat around her shoulders, a gentle smile playing on his lips. "It's chilly in here," he said softly. Amelia's heart raced as she held onto the coat, which smelled faintly of him. Though it seemed an ordinary act of kindness, it felt deeply intimate to her. In that simple moment, she felt as if James was wrapping her in his own warmth, unknowingly grounding her in a way she desperately needed. The memory that perhaps solidified her belief in their love happened one rainy afternoon. Amelia had been alone in the library, lost in a book, when she heard the pitter-patter of rain against the windows. Growing up, rainy days had always been spent with her parents, curled up together with hot cocoa and stories. Lost in memories, Amelia's heart ached with longing. To her surprise, James walked in, soaked from the rain, a bouquet of wildflowers in his hand. "Found these in the garden," he said, placing the flowers on the table beside her. Amelia smiled, touched by his thoughtfulness. She didn't know that he had simply noticed the flowers and thought they looked beautiful, without realizing the weight they held for her. But to Amelia, it felt like he had seen her sadness and reached out, offering her a small token of love. She cherished the flowers, pressing them between the pages of her favorite book, and would often come back to them whenever she needed comfort. In the quiet moments, Amelia would often reflect on their relationship, feeling incredibly fortunate. She believed that love didn't have to be loud or extravagant. It was in the little things, the fleeting glances, the comforting silences, and the warm cups of tea shared in solitude. James, on the other hand, had complicated feelings. His heart was filled with more negative emotions and had less room for love. James had always lived in the shadow of his older brother, Ethan, who seemed to embody every quality their parents valued. Steady, composed, and intelligent. From a young age, he was known as the golden child, the one who always did the right thing and made their parents proud. Ethan's accomplishments were celebrated, his calm demeanor praised, and his leadership encouraged. James, on the other hand, struggled to find his place in a family that, in his eyes, had already chosen its favorite. According to James, his family was more biased towards Ethan, and they never believed in him. One evening, when James was a teenager, he overheard a conversation between his parents. They were discussing Ethan's future and how he would eventually take over the family business. His mother's voice was filled with pride, and his father agreed wholeheartedly. "He's got the discipline, the vision. He's going to make us proud," his father had said, his tone filled with certainty. Then his mother had added, almost as an afterthought, "James, on the other hand, well, he's still young. He'll find his way eventually." Those words echoed in James's mind for years. To him, they were proof that his parents didn't believe in him. They saw him as an afterthought, someone they tolerated but didn't value. Every praise Ethan received felt like a stab to his confidence. Every slight against him, a reminder that he was, in their eyes, lesser. This created a toxic cycle where James would try to prove himself, only to be met with disappointment or indifference from his parents. Whenever James had a particularly rough day, he would often retreat to the backyard, sitting beneath the large oak tree, lost in his frustration. Amelia would find him there, silently sitting beside him until he was ready to talk. Amelia would always comfort him and stand for him. Her words of apprehension would always be him. "Don't take their words to heart, James," she'll say softly. "You're amazing, just as you are. You don't have to be like Ethan. You're James, and that's enough." Whenever he felt the sting of his family's favoritism, Amelia would somehow find a way to make him feel better. Her unwavering belief in him was a balm to his wounded pride. Her words a lifeline that he clung to in his darkest moments. However, Ethan, Evelyn's eldest son, was the opposite of his younger brother. He was more responsible and mature for his age. He had a natural inclination toward business. He took it upon himself to step into his mother's role in the family's empire, helping his father maintain the family's legacy. As he grew older, Ethan's dedication became unwavering. He finished his education, joined the company, and took over daily operations, all the while managing the expectations of a company that had been built by a formidable woman like his mother. He spent most of his time in the city, working tirelessly to uphold the family name and fulfill the duties his mother had left behind. Evelyn, watching Ethan carry the weight of the family's legacy, felt a deep sense of pride, but also guilt. She knew he had inherited her ambition and talent, but she also saw the sacrifices he was making, choosing work over a more personal life. In moments of solitude, she wondered if her decision had taken away Ethan's freedom. But when he came to visit, often surprising her and Amelia with little gifts and stories from the city, his warmth reassured her. Ethan had taken the mantle of responsibility gracefully, while James and Amelia enjoyed a quieter life away from the bustling demands of the business world. One day, not long before he moved to the city, James had a heated conversation with his mother. He had gathered the courage to confront her about how he felt overwhelmed, venting years of pent-up frustration. "You've never believed in me," he accused, his voice tight with emotion. "All you've ever cared about is Ethan. It's like I don't even exist to you." Evelyn looked at him with a calm but weary expression. "James, it's not about favoritism. It's about responsibility. Ethan has shown that he can handle the weight of our family's legacy. You're different, James. I'm still waiting to see you find your purpose." The words stung, and James felt a familiar wave of resentment rising within him. "Maybe if you actually gave me a chance, I could prove myself." Evelyn shook her head, her voice soft but firm. "Proving yourself isn't about what you think others expect, James. It's about what you genuinely want for yourself. You're always trying to compete with Ethan, and until you let that go, you'll never find your own path." But to James, her words only reinforced the idea that she didn't believe in him, that she would always see him as lesser than Ethan. After that conversation, he decided to leave for the city, determined to show her and everyone that he could succeed without their help. He wanted to prove his worth, not just to his family, but to Amelia too. He wanted to be someone she could look up to, someone who wasn't just Ethan's little brother, but a man in his own right. When James made the decision to move to the city to pursue a career of his own, he thought it would show his family that he could succeed independently. But a deeper, unspoken reason lingered. He wanted to prove his worth to his mother, Evelyn, who had always been clear about her admiration for Ethan. Though she never explicitly voiced her doubts about James, he could sense her lack of faith in him, especially in comparison to his brother. And so he left for the city, envisioning a future where he would return successful, with a solid career and a newfound respect from everyone, especially Evelyn. Before he left, however, James made a bold decision to solidify his bond with Amelia, aware that his mother had her own intentions regarding Amelia's future. Evelyn had been candid about her vision of Amelia and Ethan as a pair. She believed that Ethan's strength, integrity, and steady nature would be the perfect match for Amelia, who deserved someone who would care for her sincerely. But James, aware of his mother's plan, was determined to make Amelia his before Evelyn could intervene. He didn't want to risk losing her, especially not to his brother, whom he already viewed as a rival in both business and family life. One evening, under a canopy of stars in the quiet garden where they had often spent their childhood, James kneeled down and proposed to Amelia. He took her hand, his voice wavering slightly as he asked, "Amelia, will you marry me?" The sincerity in his eyes and the way he held her hand tightly made her heart swell. She couldn't help but say yes, and when she did, her entire being lit up with happiness. She believed that James was her forever, and that their love was the kind of love stories were made of. However, the proposal didn't sit well with Evelyn. The following morning, she confronted James privately. Her voice calm, but her eyes filled with concern. "You proposed to Amelia without discussing it with me?" she asked, her tone layered with disappointment. James clenched his jaw, a flicker of frustration crossing his face. "Mother, I love Amelia, and she loves me. Why should anyone else's opinion matter?" "Because Amelia deserves someone who will put her happiness above all else, James," she replied, her gaze piercing. "Someone who won't view her as a possession or use her to prove their own worth." He felt a wave of indignation rise within him. "Are you saying I'm not good enough for her?" Evelyn sighed, sadness lining her features. "I'm saying that I know you, James. I know the side of you that struggles with insecurities, the side that uses people to mask that. You've always felt threatened by Ethan, and now, instead of focusing on building something meaningful, you're focused on proving something. Is that truly fair to Amelia?" "Mother," James said, his tone laced with bitterness, "you've never believed in me. You've always thought Ethan was the better son, the one destined for greatness. Maybe it's time you see that I can be just as good, if not better." She shook her head, a deep worry in her eyes. "It's not about who's better, James. It's about what's best for Amelia. And I fear that you might end up hurting her." James felt anger surge through him, his mother's lack of faith like a slap in the face. "If you think I'll let you push her toward Ethan, you're wrong. Amelia is engaged to me now. I love her, and I will make her happy." Evelyn was silent for a long moment, watching her son with an expression of resignation. She finally nodded, realizing that any further argument would be futile. When she saw Amelia later, radiating joy and sharing the news of her engagement, Evelyn forced a warm smile. Despite her reservations, she couldn't bear to take away Amelia's happiness. Amelia was like a daughter to her, and she had promised Amelia's mother that she would love and care for her. So, despite her unease, Evelyn accepted the engagement, quietly vowing to protect Amelia if things ever went wrong. Shortly after their engagement, James left for the city, driven by his desire to prove himself to Amelia, to his family, and most of all, to his mother. In Evelyn's heart, a quiet sadness lingered as she watched James walk away, aware that despite her warnings, he was bound to make his own choices, and so was Amelia. But as the days passed, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that, one day, James' choices would force her to fulfill her silent promise to protect Amelia, whatever it might take. At first, James and Amelia's long-distance relationship had a rhythm, a pattern that felt natural to both of them. Even though they were in different cities, Amelia would call him every night, sharing stories about her day, asking about his, and always ending with words of encouragement. She was proud of him for chasing his dreams, and her unwavering support kept him grounded. Every time he was stressed or felt out of place in the bustling new city, it was Amelia's voice that brought him back to himself, reminding him why he was working so hard. In those first few months, Amelia's love was a lifeline that gave him strength, and he would often tell her, "I couldn't do any of this without you." To her, his words meant everything, reaffirming that their bond was unbreakable. But as time passed, the excitement of his new job began to take over. The fast-paced city life, the competition, and the endless networking were exhilarating, and James found himself wrapped up in a new lifestyle. Gradually, the nightly calls became shorter and the texts less frequent. Amelia noticed but chalked it up to his workload, choosing to support him rather than question the changes. She told herself he would return to her soon and that their love was strong enough to weather any temporary distance. Then Victoria entered James's life. She was ambitious, confident, and well-connected in the industry, a striking contrast to the gentle, supportive Amelia who had been his safe haven. Victoria was bold, the type of woman who didn't hesitate to make herself known, and her presence in the office was as magnetic as it was unsettling. At first, James was polite, keeping his distance, and even made an effort to bring up Amelia in casual conversation. But Victoria had her own reasons for getting close to him. When she found out he was Evelyn's son, the child of a former powerhouse in the business world, her interest sharpened. She knew who James was, and more importantly, who his family was. James tried to put boundaries between them, but Victoria was relentless. She would casually brush his arm during a conversation, bring him coffee just the way he liked it, and compliment him in ways that made him feel more confident, almost essential. She laughed at his jokes, gave him knowing glances during meetings, and made him feel like he was the center of her world. Slowly, Victoria's attention started to fill the spaces where Amelia's love had been. He started looking forward to seeing her at the office, feeling that her admiration boosted his self-worth, something he had long struggled with, especially being in his older brother's shadow. When James tried to subtly mention that he was engaged, thinking it would deter her, Victoria brushed it off, even feigning excitement. "She must be wonderful," she'd say, with an almost dismissive smile. But her actions contradicted her words, as she became even more attentive, often telling him she needed his advice or that he was the only one she could count on. She'd make excuses to work late with him, always finding ways to show him that she understood his ambitions and his frustrations, especially those surrounding his mother and brother. James didn't notice it at first, but Victoria was feeding the very insecurities he harbored, making him feel that only she truly understood him. Bit by bit, Victoria began to replace Amelia in James's life. Late-night calls turned into work dinners, and slowly, James started avoiding Amelia's calls, telling her he was busy or tired. The excuses were flimsy, but Amelia believed him, trusting that his intentions were as genuine as hers. And although a part of James felt guilty, he let himself fall deeper into Victoria's grasp. With her, he didn't feel the pressure to live up to his family's expectations or compete with his brother's success. She told him he was enough just as he was, and he wanted to believe her. Eventually, James stopped resisting Victoria altogether. What started as flirtatious exchanges and shared confidences turned into secret meetings outside the office. He knew he was betraying Amelia, but he couldn't seem to pull himself away. Victoria had become the bright, captivating presence that filled his every waking thought. And while Amelia continued to believe in the man she loved, he was giving his heart to another, leaving her behind in a silent betrayal. Amelia was unaware of Victoria's presence, blissfully believing their love was secure. She sent James thoughtful messages, mailed him little care packages, and even began making plans to visit him. She saw a future in him, a life built on the love they had nurtured for years. But for James, every small reminder of Amelia only seemed to fuel his guilt, which he quickly buried under the thrill of his new life with Victoria. In his moments of reflection, James would tell himself that what he had with Victoria didn't mean he didn't love Amelia. It was just different. He'd convince himself it was temporary, that he could return to Amelia when he was ready, and she would still be there waiting for him. He took her for granted, dismissing her efforts as she continued to show him unwavering love and loyalty from miles away. But beneath the surface, the reality was clear. Victoria had replaced Amelia in his heart, and he was too far gone to admit it. Meanwhile, Amelia grew restless. Missing her fiancé, she decided to move to the city to be closer to him, convinced that the distance had been the real problem. She surprised James with the news of her arrival, and while he tried to hide his shock, she could sense a change in him. To complicate things, James introduced her to Victoria as his close friend from work. At first, Victoria played the role of the friendly colleague well, but soon her subtle jabs at Amelia began. She'd make cutting remarks, all while feigning innocence, making Amelia feel out of place in James's new world. Victoria, with her cunning charm and manipulation, knew exactly how to keep James wrapped around her finger while systematically breaking down Amelia's self-esteem. She saw Amelia as an obstacle, someone too soft-spoken to stand up for herself, but too close to James for Victoria's liking. Victoria took it upon herself to sabotage Amelia's confidence subtly, all while portraying herself as the innocent friend whenever James was around. One afternoon, James had invited both Victoria and Amelia to join him for coffee at a trendy cafe near his office. Victoria arrived with a bright smile, hugging James a little too warmly, and sat next to him. Amelia, seated across the table, tried to ignore the discomfort churning inside her as Victoria giggled and leaned into James with casual ease. When Amelia excused herself to get a napkin, Victoria seized the opportunity. As soon as Amelia returned, Victoria accidentally spilled her hot coffee all over Amelia's dress, causing her to jump up in pain and surprise. "Oh my God, Amelia!" Victoria gasped dramatically, her hand flying to her mouth. "I'm so sorry, I didn't see you coming back. I can be so clumsy sometimes." She rushed to Amelia with exaggerated concern, wiping her dress while covertly smirking. Amelia tried to play it off, though her dress was ruined and her skin was slightly red from the spill. But James only saw Victoria's apology and Amelia's quiet distress. He turned to Amelia with a gentle reproach. "It was just an accident, Amelia. No need to look so upset. I'm sure Victoria didn't mean it." Amelia opened her mouth to protest, but Victoria quickly interjected, eyes wide with mock concern. "I'm so sorry, Amelia. I feel terrible. I hope this doesn't ruin our friendship." She gave James a look of regret, which only made him believe Amelia was overreacting. Feeling embarrassed, Amelia dropped it, even as she felt the sting of tears behind her eyes. Though Amelia was hurt, she decided to push through. She loved James, and no amount of Victoria's snide remarks would sway her. She focused on the wedding plans, determined to salvage what they had. A few weeks before the wedding, Amelia had planned to surprise James by organizing some wedding paperwork he needed to submit. She spent hours at his apartment, carefully filing and arranging everything. When Victoria showed up unannounced, her eyes landed on Amelia, hunched over the papers. Pretending to be surprised, she walked up and placed her hand on Amelia's shoulder, causing her to startle. "Wow, Amelia," Victoria said with a smile. "Are you sure you're okay handling all this? You seem a bit overwhelmed." Amelia, caught off guard, laughed nervously and brushed off Victoria's comment. But after Amelia left, Victoria deliberately moved several key documents and added a few random papers to the pile, knowing it would only make things look disorganized. When James arrived home, she pointed at the papers, feigning innocence. "James, I just thought you should know." Amelia was trying to help, but it looked like she was struggling with all these documents, Victoria said, pretending to be supportive. "I tried to help her, but she didn't want my input. I just hope everything is in order." When James looked through the papers, he found them in complete disarray, with missing forms and misplaced details. Frustrated, he confronted Amelia the next day. "Amelia, I appreciate you trying to help, but if you're going to take on something like this, at least be thorough. Now I have to reorganize everything before the deadline." Amelia's heart sank. She knew she had left everything perfectly organized, but with Victoria's concern acting as a cover, James believed she had been careless. But things took a drastic turn the day before the wedding when James's older brother, Ethan, arrived from America, where he had been living for years. Ethan had always been quiet and observant, a protective elder brother who had kept his distance after Amelia and James's engagement. He'd cared for Amelia secretly, but seeing her with his younger brother had been enough to push him away to another country, hoping he'd forget her. The evening before the wedding, Ethan returned to the hotel after a late-night walk, only to spot James and Victoria locked in an intimate embrace in the lobby. He was furious. How could his brother betray Amelia, the girl who had loved him so deeply? Without a second thought, Ethan confronted James in his hotel room. He demanded to know why James was marrying Amelia when he was clearly involved with Victoria. With a careless shrug, James revealed that his motivations weren't exactly pure. Amelia was adored by their parents, who had hinted they'd only leave the family inheritance to him if he honored his engagement. In his arrogance, James saw Amelia as his ticket to both love and wealth. Ethan, outraged, punched James, disgusted by his selfishness and deception. Determined to protect Amelia, Ethan went to her, intending to reveal James's betrayal, but she refused to believe him. Heartbroken, Ethan knew he needed to provide undeniable proof. The grand hall was elegantly decorated, draped in white and gold, with soft music playing in the background as guests filled the seats. The soft hum of excitement and anticipation filled the room. Amelia stood by the altar, radiant in her ivory gown, though her heart raced with a strange unease. She couldn't quite place the source of her discomfort, chalking it up to pre-wedding jitters. Her fiancé, James, stood beside her, looking sharp in his suit, but his eyes were a mix of pride and calculation as he glanced at the crowd, basking in the attention. Ethan, James's older brother, stood off to the side, his face a mask of quiet tension. He clutched an envelope in his hand, filled with photographs, text conversations, and other damning evidence he'd collected throughout the night. The moment was finally here. He had tried to tell Amelia privately to save her the embarrassment, but she had refused to believe him. Now, he had no choice but to expose the truth in front of everyone. The officiant was midway through his opening words when Ethan took a deep breath and stepped forward. His voice was steady but loud enough to cut through the murmur of the crowd. "Stop," he announced, his tone commanding attention. "This wedding cannot go on." The room fell silent. Guests exchanged confused glances, and Amelia looked at Ethan, her brows furrowing in disbelief. James's face tightened, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. Ethan turned toward Amelia, his gaze filled with sorrow and resolve. "I didn't want to do this here, but you left me no choice. Amelia, I care about you too much to let you marry my brother under false pretenses. You deserve to know the truth." A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd as Ethan held up the envelope for everyone to see. Inside this envelope is proof that James has been unfaithful. He's been seeing another woman, Victoria, his so-called friend from work. This friendship is not what he made it seem. Amelia's face drained of color as she looked from Ethan to James, disbelief clouding her features. She shook her head, but Ethan continued. "Hold out the photographs, holding them high for the crowd to see. Pictures of James and Victoria at various locations around the city, arms intertwined, laughing, and even sharing intimate moments, flashed in front of everyone. Each image hit Amelia like a physical blow, the trust she'd built with James unraveling in an instant. Gasps and whispers filled the room as the guests took in the evidence. "James, do you have anything to say?" Ethan challenged, his voice filled with anger he had held back for too long. James tried to maintain his composure, but the weight of the stares and the tightening in his throat betrayed him. His gaze shifted between the crowd and Amelia, but his silence spoke louder than any denial. "You've lied to Amelia," Ethan said, his voice filled with disappointment. Amelia's vision blurred, her heart pounding painfully as she stared at the photos. She could feel her whole world collapsing, each image driving a stake deeper into her heart. James finally tried to speak, stammering. "Amelia, it's not what it looks like. I can explain." But Amelia didn't let him finish. With trembling hands, she took a step forward and raised her hand, slapping him across the face with all the force of her heartbreak and betrayal. The sharp sound echoed in the silence, and James staggered back, clutching his cheek in shock. "How could you?" she demanded, her voice breaking as she looked at him, her once beloved friend and fiancé. "I trusted you, James. I believed in you. You were my best friend, my first love. How could you do this to me?" James stammered again, but his words were empty, the guilt written plainly on his face. He glanced down, his shoulders slumping as the weight of his actions crashed down on him. He knew he couldn't escape the truth, not with the entire room bearing witness. Amelia turned to Ethan, her eyes filled with tears but also gratitude. "Why? Why did you do this?" Ethan's face softened, his anger at James giving way to compassion as he looked at Amelia. "I couldn't let you be hurt like this, Amelia. I couldn't stand by and watch him lie to you, knowing the truth. You've been through enough." Just then, Ethan's mother stepped forward, her face a mask of both sorrow and understanding. She placed a gentle hand on Amelia's shoulder, guiding her away from the shattered altar, away from James, who still stood there in shame and silence. Looking at Ethan, she said softly, "If anyone should marry Amelia, it should be you. You've been there for her when she needed you, and it's clear you cared deeply about her." She turned to Amelia. "You know that we've always loved you as our own daughter. Let us make it official, if you're willing." Amelia, shaken to the core, looked at Ethan, searching his face for answers. His expression was tender, his eyes steady, and in them, she saw the love and respect she had always longed for, but had never found with James. After a few tense, silent moments, she nodded. "Yes, I don't know what the future holds, but I know I trust you, Ethan. The guests watched as the officiant, who had been equally stunned by the turn of events, quickly adjusted. The vows were simple, unplanned, but filled with more meaning than anyone could have anticipated. When Ethan took Amelia's hands in his, the touch was warm and reassuring, a promise that he would protect her from the heartache she had endured. Standing across from Amelia, Ethan felt a complex weight settle into his chest. A blend of relief, regret, and a deep, unspoken desire he had carried for years. He had never wanted to destroy her dream wedding, and had never intended to be the one to expose his own brother's lies in front of her. But the moment he discovered James's betrayal, Ethan knew he couldn't let the wedding go on. Allowing her to marry James, knowing the man he truly was, would have haunted him forever. He wanted to give Amelia the love she deserved, not one built on broken promises and hidden lies. But as he now faced her in the gentle glow of the altar, dressed in her wedding gown, a flicker of disbelief washed over him. The very thing he had only dreamed about was now his reality. He was marrying Amelia, the girl who had captivated his heart since they were young. She had always been the one he had measured everyone else against. But his loyalty to his brother, and the knowledge that her heart had always belonged to James, kept him silent, hidden in the shadows. It was why he left, burying his feelings halfway across the world, hoping time and distance would weaken his love for her. They hadn't. Ethan's fingers trembled slightly as he took Amelia's hand in his, feeling the slight shiver in her grip as she looked up at him, clearly overwhelmed. Her delicate features were touched with confusion and raw emotion, her eyes searching as though trying to piece together how everything had come to this. He knew she was hurting, blindsided by the truth of her former fiancé. Yet she was standing here with him, trusting him despite it all. As they exchanged rings, he noticed her hands trembled as she slid the band onto his finger, the symbolic weight of the act settling between them. When she looked back up, her expression softened, a silent acknowledgement perhaps of the strength he had shown for her sake. Ethan felt a deep protectiveness rise within him, one that had been simmering for years. Finally, the officiant's voice broke through his thoughts. "Now, you may kiss the bride." Amelia's soft lips parted slightly, but her expression was laced with nervousness. For the first time, Ethan hesitated. He could see her apprehension, the way her lips quivered ever so slightly as he moved closer. This wasn't the passionate kiss of lovers who had dreamt of this moment. This was something deeper, more intense, a binding connection they were both discovering for the first time. He brushed his lips over hers gently, savoring the warmth of her breath and the softness of her skin against his. She didn't respond at first, her lips remaining still, but Ethan moved a hand to her waist, pulling her closer. At his touch, he felt her gasp against his mouth, and in that brief moment, he deepened the kiss, allowing his lips to part hers, his tongue slipping in to explore the warmth he had only imagined. Her initial surprise melted into a response as their kiss deepened, an unspoken understanding passing between them. It was intense and electrifying, a culmination of the years of longing he had buried. After a few seconds, he pulled back, his lips lingering just a moment longer as he felt her shiver in his hold. A small, satisfied smile played on his lips as he looked at her flushed face, her eyes wide and lips tingling from their kiss. He could see that a part of her was still adjusting, but for the first time, he saw a flicker of trust there too. And as he held her, he silently promised himself that he would be everything for her, protector, partner, and the love she had deserved all along. James, still standing alone at the altar, was left to watch. He felt weird seeing Amelia kiss someone else other than him. He watched as Amelia, now the bride of his brother, was embraced by the family, her tears drying as she found comfort in Ethan's arms. In the days following their sudden marriage, Ethan showed Amelia the kind of love she had never experienced. He respected her space, offering companionship without pressure and quietly reminding her that she was not alone. Ethan would cook for her, bring her tea in the mornings, and read to her from her favorite novels, bringing warmth and comfort back into her life. Slowly, Amelia found herself noticing Ethan's kindness, his patience, and the quiet strength he exuded. He was everything James had never been: steadfast, reliable, and considerate. One evening, as they walked by the riverside, Ethan confessed that he had admired her for years, but had kept his distance out of respect for his brother. At this statement, Amelia questioned him. "You said you have liked me for a long time." Ethan had a bitter smile on his face. He slowly explained to her that before her parents' deaths, she used to spend most of the time with him. But due to this shocking news, she went into depression and forgot many chunks of her memory. And after that, you gradually became close to James. "I have liked playing with you when you were little. Your mother used to ask me to take care of you. I have those memories embedded in my mind." Hearing all this, Amelia got emotional. She couldn't control her tears anymore, and she sobbed harder in Ethan's embrace. Ethan comforted her and said sweet words of assurance to calm her down. After that day, Amelia opened her heart and she started treating Ethan with care. She started depending on Ethan, and this made Ethan very happy. And so enough Amelia felt warmth in her heart, realizing she'd begun to care for him deeply too. As seasons changed, Amelia's life with Ethan filled with laughter, warmth, and quiet, enduring love. Their bond, rooted in friendship and care, deepened with each passing day. As for James, he soon came to realize that he made a big mistake, as Amelia had been the ideal friend, girlfriend, and fiancée to James, loyal, caring, and always thoughtful. Her love for James had blossomed from friendship to a deeper, unwavering commitment. She knew his routines, remembered his likes and dislikes, and had a way of reading his mood even before he spoke. In every small way, she had made it her mission to support him, wanting to ease his stress, help him succeed, and show him the warmth she believed he deserved. During their time together, Amelia would often surprise James with small gestures. Packing his favorite lunches when he was swamped with work, leaving notes on his desk, or patiently listening to his plans and dreams. She had a unique blend of empathy and strength, always putting James' needs before her own, never asking for more than he was willing to give. When James moved to the city, she used to go out of her way to bring a touch of home with her, hoping to make him feel more comfortable in the midst of his busy schedule. She believed that her dedication was enough, and that he would eventually realize how deeply she cared for him. But James rarely acknowledged these efforts. He took Amelia's devotion for granted, dismissing her gestures as just another part of his day, rather than realizing the love and effort she poured into each one. He brushed off her presence, sometimes even neglecting to thank her, or returning her warmth with half-hearted appreciation. And after Amelia married Ethan, she no longer cared for James or sought his approval. She had moved on, and Evelyn, James and Ethan's mother, saw through James's carelessness. After discovering his deception and his betrayal of Amelia's trust, Evelyn made the decision to exclude James from the family business. Her words had been resolute. "If you can't value the people who love you, how can I trust you to uphold our family's legacy?" At first, James was stunned by his mother's decision, believing it was a temporary punishment. But as time went on, the weight of what he had lost began to dawn on him. He looked at Victoria, who was by his side in the aftermath of the family fallout, and couldn't help but notice the difference between her and Amelia. Where Amelia would have comforted him, reminded him of his strengths, and supported him through his struggles, Victoria was dismissive and self-centered. She would brush off his worries, often complaining that he needed to toughen up or stop moping. She was quick to criticize, impatient with his failings, and indifferent to his pain. She'd laugh at his discomfort or try to change the subject, avoiding any conversation that didn't center on her. Amelia, on the other hand, had been a source of comfort and stability. She had known how to soothe him in his hardest moments and celebrate with him in his best. Where Victoria saw his struggles as weaknesses, Amelia had always seen them as a reason to stand by his side, lifting him up when he stumbled. James was haunted by memories of the countless times he had brushed off Amelia's kindness. He remembered the little notes she would leave, the care she'd take in making sure he was happy and comfortable, the hours she spent planning surprises for his birthday, and even his successes. Each memory of her thoughtfulness brought a pang of regret, making him realize just how foolish he'd been. Amelia had given him the kind of love that was built to last, and he had traded it for something superficial, something that faded as quickly as it had come. He thought back to the wedding. The moment he had seen Amelia standing next to Ethan, her face filled with a quiet determination he had never appreciated before. She was no longer the girl waiting for him. She was a woman with purpose, standing beside a man who valued her. The realization burned him, knowing that he had lost her to someone who truly saw her worth, someone who had admired her all along without ever asking for anything in return. Ethan was the man he could never be. The man who had waited patiently, respected Amelia's feelings, and when the moment came, stepped in, not out of obligation, but out of genuine love. Seeing Amelia happy with Ethan, watching her glow with a new confidence and grace, made James feel the full weight of his mistakes. He had let go of the only person who had loved him selflessly, and he had no one to blame but himself. Now, as James watched from the sidelines, he could see how he'd fallen victim to his own arrogance. Amelia was everything he needed, but never appreciated until it was too late. And now, as she blossomed with Ethan, it was clear to everyone, especially to James, that he had been nothing more than a fool who let true love slip through his fingers.